is no password. That's what I have.
I understand.
Yeah, there is no password, so I'm really confused. Extremely confused because there is no.
I understand.
Yeah, sorry about that. All right, so assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Inshallah, today we're going to be discussing, let's go over really quick what we talked about yesterday. We talked about when the whole mahr basically is waived, and we talked about when the wife would basically have the right for what is called mahr al-mithal. And we said that's an equivalent mahr when the mahr was not assigned, or if basically the mahr was not even mentioned at all in the marriage contract, or if the mahr was, let's say, not qualified to be a mahr, so then in that situation she would basically have the right for an equivalent mahr. So she doesn't just not get mahr, but we would basically use another equivalent mahr as in replacement to one, a mahr that was not mentioned, or a mahr that was mentioned but it was basically not qualified to be a mahr, whether it was, let's see, something that was not pure, something that was not of value, or something that was perhaps a haram substance, etc. Then in that situation, that would not basically qualify for a mahr. So we won't say, oh, well, you know what, you should have asked and you should have known that this is not allowed to be a mahr, but we'll say you would get the equivalent mahr. Just keep that one in mind. And we said the equivalent mahr would basically mean equivalent to the average of the mahr from her father's side. Other scholars said from her mother's side, but the majority actually said from her father's side. Okay, just keep that one in mind. So we left off at this subtopic right there, which is mut'at al-mutallaqa. What does a mut'a really mean? And we were talking about mut'a, and we said, well, mut'a means to enjoy something, but this isn't talking about anything that is fun and enjoying whatsoever, and has nothing to do with the mut'a marriage slash the temporary marriage, has nothing to do with none of that. It basically is just talking about the substance, the basically the maintenance that the woman would get in case of a divorce. Okay, so if a woman were to get divorced, does she have the right to maintenance after the time of divorce and during the time of the waiting period? We talked about the waiting period, and we said the waiting period was going to really be determined based on the situation that this woman is in. So the waiting period, if she was pregnant, would be until she would have her baby. So if she had her baby, let's say 3 days after, then in that situation, her iddah was only 3 days. Okay. And two, if she is menstruating, it would be for 3 menstrual cycles. And three, if she basically was not menstruating, whether due to young age or old age, menopause, etc., then in that situation, she would basically do her iddah or waiting period for 3 consecutive months. Okay, let's see right there. So when we speak about this mut'at al-talaq, you're going to see this word right there, this mut'a right there. But remember, it is not referring to mut'a as a temporary marriage, but this is actually referring to the maintenance. So mut'a, maintenance, or alimony. But of course, in the secular governments, maintenance or alimony is really, the something that the husband would pay for the rest of his life, I guess. But in Islam, it's only until basically the end of iddah. Okay, let's see. So we're talking about this amount of money, depending on, and of course, that regardless of when the husband is probably maybe perhaps well maintained, or in other words, has a good income, or whether he's got low income. There's a certain amount of money that he still owes to the wife even after the resolution of that marriage. What is the evidence? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلْمُطَلَّقَاتِ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ. And for the women that are divorcees, they would have the right for al-mata', the maintenance in good. And this would be, the word is حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ. It's incumbent upon the people with religious integrity. Okay, so it's incumbent upon the people with religious integrity. We're going to see how different scholars actually interpreted this one. Let's continue right there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, وَمَتِّعُوهُنَّ عَلَى الْمُوسِعِ قَدَرُهُ وَعَلَى الْمُقْتِرِ قَدْرُهُ مَتَاعًا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And give them that maintenance, and it would be based on, one, if the person was well maintained, would be based on what they're capable of giving in maintenance. And the one that is suffering, perhaps maybe not well maintained, in other words, they don't have a high income, then in that situation, it would be dependent on what they can handle in basically deducting from their income. And that would be mata'an bil ma'ruf. It would be a maintenance that they would give. The word is bil ma'ruf. Now, one thing, the word bil ma'ruf can have two meanings. The first meaning can mean mata'an bil ma'ruf can mean bil ma'ruf to mean dependent on the culture. المعروف عرفا كالمشروط شرطا. If something is actually known within the culture, then in that situation it would be equivalent to a condition or a bylaw within a contract. حقا على المحسنين. That would be basically incumbent, and it would be responsibility upon, the word is al-muhsinin. Who's al-muhsin? Al-muhsin is supposed to be a person that gives, and not necessarily as a compensation in justice, but at a higher level than justice. In other words, this is encouraging the husbands that even if you may dislike a certain manner from this woman, even if you probably felt that she had abused you, she did not live up to your expectations, she wasn't doing what is right, etc. Definitely. No divorce happens because we somehow are just blending in too well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is right there telling the guys, if you really want to be part of the muhsineen, you really want to be part of those that are considered at the highest rank in their giving, we're not asking here for what is justice, that she was rude, she was always doing this to me, then therefore you want to probably punish her for that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I want you to give not based on what she deserves, but what you deserve as in value, what you deserve as in a status in the akhirah. If your status in the akhirah is that you want to be part of the muhsineen, then you would actually pay this amount just because you want to be within and included within that status, not because she deserves it. Okay, let's see. So is that really obligatory for him to actually pay this wife this maintenance after divorce? So let's look at this one. Scholars actually had differences of opinions on the ruling of this maintenance. Why'd they have differences of opinions? Well, let's first see what those differences of opinions are, and then we'll figure out why they had differences of opinions. Number one, the first opinion basically said it is wajib. It's obligatory to pay this alimony. We're just going to use the word alimony, even though it doesn't actually mean the same alimony, that they would have in secular laws. Okay, but we're just going to use that. Should we use alimony or should we use maintenance? Whatever, we can use two. Okay, so now the first opinion basically said it was obligatory, and this is for every single divorced woman. And that's why Ibn Qudama, who is actually a Hanbali madhab, but he actually wrote a very important book. It's called al-Mughni. Al-Mughni is in 8 huge volumes, and I mean huge volumes. But this Mughni, it's It's basically not necessarily just the Hanbali madhab, although Ibn Qudamah himself was Hanbali madhab, but the Mughni is actually considered what is called a fiqh al-muqaran. It's more of a comparative fiqh and or fiqh muqaran in both muqaran or muqaran, they depends on the scholars and what they basically preferred to say. But at the end, let's see what he said. He said, روي عن أحمد أن لكل مطلقة متاع. Said it was narrated upon Ahmad. Why did we say narrated upon Ahmad? Because you've got Imam Ahmad was not a faqih, he was more of a muhaddith, but he did have his fiqh preferences. And of course, his son, Abdullah, was at least he was the one of the key figures. Not only did he write his collection, Il-Musnad, basically, which is in, well, I mean, depends on which publication you're going for, but it's generally in 5 or 6 volumes. But right now it's actually done in 57 volumes. Okay. And the reason why, because you've got Shu'aib al-Arnaut, he basically wanted to go over those hadith and then classify which one is authentic and which one is not. Regardless, so it was mentioned upon Imam Ahmad, okay, that every single woman that is a divorcee has the right for this maintenance. And it was also mentioned upon Ali ibn Abi Talib, who's got a Sahabi, we've got Al-Hasan, we've got Sa'id ibn Jubayr, who is basically a tabi'i right there, Abi Qulab al-Zuhri, Qatada al-Dhahhak. So all of these would basically be either a tabi'i or a tabi'i, well, except Abu Thawr. Okay, let's see. What is their evidence? So their evidence that it is obligatory, they said, well, the ayah basically says walil mutallaqat, and they said that this lam right there is to basically mean that it is a property that is their ownership, that is attributed to them, therefore it's something that they own, it's something that they have the right to, so therefore here's their evidence. They said every single one. It did not exclude any mutallaqa, any divorcee, and considered every single divorcee, this is what she has in rights. And the main right is basically il-mata', is basically the maintenance. Let's see. And the second opinion basically says that that maintenance is mustahab. It is preferred. Wait a minute. They're not actually saying that it's not obligatory. They're saying it's mustahab, meaning that it is preferred for every single divorcee and not obligatory. Okay, so who are you talking about? Which type of divorcee? Well, they said there's no difference between a divorcee, basically whether whether there was intimacy or whether there was no intimacy. They said it's basically included both, and therefore it would be just like that he would pay that maintenance. And whether we basically had a certain amount of mahar that was assigned or not, it doesn't make a difference. They said it's preferred that he would pay that maintenance, but not necessarily obligatory. And who actually said that? Well, that's it, Imam Malik, Shuraih. And he's Shuraih al-Qadi. Well, and Layth ibn Sa'd, that's another scholar that is actually equivalent to the ilm of Malik ibn Abi Layla. And what is their evidence? Well, they said, well, look at this. We see حقا على المحسنين and حقا على المتقين. Okay, well, I mean, there it is. It says حق. It's a حق upon those. And what they basically noted on that, they said, well, this ayah is basically making it obligatory, or at least, let's say, a higher level upon these people, but not upon the others. So this isn't talking about any Muslim, but this is talking about those that really are living up to this level or want their status to be this high in terms of the highest level of faith, but therefore it is not necessarily incumbent, not necessarily imperative upon the others. And they said that's the same thing when we're talking about haqqan ala al-muttaqeen. Said you look at haqqan ala al-muttaqeen, it's basically saying, well, this is incumbent upon those that are living taqwa, those that are living taqwa. So it's a higher level than just a Muslim, because this person is between the level of a mu'min and the level of a muhsin. And therefore, they said, well, we've got another evidence. They said, well, look at the ayah. It basically had considered it as connected, in other words, kind of like a conditioned by il-ma'ruf, conditioned it with, well, this is one based on culture, two based on, just you're just giving something in, just giving something in just because you are a good person. So this is bil ma'ruf, just trying to be good. You're just trying to kind of like give something extra. So they considered il ma'ruf to mean extra, il ma'ruf to mean like something that is beyond what is considered as the borderline. This is what they understood in the word ma'ruf. And they said if it was obligatory, then it would not have excluded it to the muhsinin and the muttaqin, and it would not have said that this was al-ma'ruf. So they understood al-ma'ruf not to being that this is based on culture per se, or this is based on, well, to let you know that this is the level of piety, but they considered that this is to encourage, but not necessarily to set it as a limit. So it's quite interesting on how they saw it that way. Definitely the Hanbalis are not comfortable with this interpretation, but let's see the third interpretation. The third interpretation, well, they said, it's basically obligatory on the woman that basically got divorced and before, look at that one, before she was even intimate. Why? Well, said her mahr was waived. At least give her maintenance. Why was her mahr waived? Remember, her mahr was waived because there was no intimacy. So the ayah basically said, well, we're going to be waiving her mahr because there was no intimacy, there was no khalwa, there was no that private space. And it was just a marriage contract with nothing actually happening. So let's waive that mahr. But we're not going to be waiving all and any type of a compensation. We're going to give her a different kind of a compensation. We're going to give her that maintenance during that time, that even though she doesn't have a waiting period, but we're just going to give it to her despite, as supposing that that's the time. That's the time just to gonna give her that compensation at least, and something to give her in support. And that's basically the madhab Hanafi and Sahibai. When you look at the word Sahibai, you're talking about Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, you're talking about Abu Yusuf. Okay, and also the opinion for Shafi'i as well, and al-Awza'i, a Lebanese and a very important Lebanese scholar. And let's see, Ibn Qudama, even though we mentioned Ibn Qudama to be in Hanbali, but he basically had attributed this to some of the Sahaba, like Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Al-Hasan, Ata, Jabir, Ibn Zayd, and Al-Sha'bi. Those would actually be not Sahaba, okay? And those would not be Sahaba, those would be Tabi'in, but certainly some of the greatest scholars as well. So what is their evidence anyways? So they basically said, well, if this is before any type of an intimacy happening and no intimacy happened, they said, well, we've got an evidence that that was also the opinion that Umar ibn al-Khattab had mentioned as well, and Ali ibn Abi Talib as well. And they said, well, if we have no other Sahabi that disagreed with this opinion, well, that would actually make it as a unanimous agreement between the Sahaba, because we don't have any other scholar or any other Sahabi objecting to this opinion. That was their evidence. It's quite interesting that they actually said that. And certainly, the woman that basically gets married, but then of course no intimacy happens and no mahr was assigned, that's what is called al-mufawwida or al-mufawwada, with a kasra, mufawwida or al-mufawwada. What does tafwid mean anyways? So tafwid actually means to give a power of attorney to something. Okay, to give a power of attorney to something. So what power of attorney did she give? Who did she assign as a power of attorney? Well, it's her own wali. So in that situation, she basically had given her wali, he was acting on her behalf. And, the situation basically was just really with her wali and this guy, really nothing happened between the woman and also the man, meaning we're talking about the husband and wife. Okay, only a marriage contract happened, but she was really out of the picture. She was all the time out of that picture. And therefore, you're looking at what فَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, that I basically let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala control all my matters. That's that word right there. That's why we needed to go to that word. What does that tafweed actually mean? Okay, so you could see, of course, in the situation where both the sides of the contract, they didn't necessarily list or assign a certain mahar, and certainly she wasn't intimate. So in that situation, they basically had considered that one of them was going to be responsible. It's like, we won't disagree on something, kind of like just a word like that, and that brought in an unexpected harm upon this woman. So in that situation, when they didn't assign a mahar, we know that she would have the equivalent mahar since this is before intimacy and no intimacy happened. But if a divorce were to happen, she basically would have, according to Abu Hanifa and according to Ahmad, she would have al-mut'a. Al-mut'a to mean basically that maintenance. Okay, so this is what they had basically said in that regards. Let's see. And what is the evidence, or at least what is the preponderant, not the evidence, but what is the preponderant in that regards? According to Umar Sulaiman al-Ashqar, who's basically the author for this one, which is also the opinion that I personally agree with him on, is that it is obligatory for every single divorcee, and the evidence is basically the same evidence that they had used. Basically, these two ayat right there, and this ayah is laying it out as a comprehensive statement, or let me use a different word, as an inclusive statement. Inclusive word, and that's basically that lam right there to indicate inclusivity, whether this woman was intimate or whether she wasn't intimate, whether there was khalwa, whether there was no khalwa, meaning that private space, that she would basically have the right to get that maintenance regardless of what happened, and certainly regardless of how this whole thing ended. And certainly, this would not be including, remember, we're speaking about talaq here, we're not talking about khula, because khula basically means that she chose to waive all of this. In khula, she chose to waive all of this. In talaq, she didn't choose to waive all of this. Okay, let's see. So what is the evidence? They said, well, we've got the lam right there, and this lam basically is to indicate ownership, to indicate that this is something that they would have the right to. And certainly the word bil ma'ruf, it basically is telling us, well, this is what people would basically know within the culture, and therefore you could see that the scholars that had interpreted bil ma'ruf as one, that this isn't just to encourage you to live up to that expectation, but this is the expectation. It's not telling you to live up to it, but it's telling you this is the expectation, this is the borderline, this is basically incumbent and basically a responsibility that you have to live up to. And then use the same word, that bil ma'ruf, which basically the Maliki had basically understood that, hey, it's just telling you that, hey, I would want you to live up to that expectation. But here we're actually, along with the Hanbalis, interpreting that, no, this isn't just telling you as an encouragement, but this is telling you this is. the expectation of a believer, the responsibility, the borderline that you basically have to live up to. And of course, that's why there's the other evidence. They said, hey, look at the word haqqan. What is haqqan? Haqqan means incumbent. And they said, if you see the word al-haqq, you see the word haqq, that basically lets you know that this is incumbent, that this is obligatory, this is something that you have to do. And that's why you look at ala al-muttaqin, because if you did not live up to here, that means you went and basically cross the borderline. Because if you are not a muttaqi, that means you trespass your boundary. And if you trespass your boundary, well, that is not a good news. Then therefore, you had committed a sin. And that's the same thing when you're talking about haqqan ala al-muhsinin. This isn't to tell us that, hey, I want you to live up to the high expectation, but this is to tell you that if you do not live up to this border, then you had really committed a sin. And certainly this is to encourage all the divorced husbands, or basically the men that are divorcing their wives, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to be part of the muttaqin, to be part of the muhsineen, and basically to tell them that if you don't live up to that, you will be held accountable. And that's the same thing when the Prophet ﷺ himself, basically when he got into a dispute with his wives, he was basically telling them to either choose to be divorced or choose to basically stay and be patient in living with him in the simple life basically that he was living. And that's why that ayah says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, qul li azwajik, O Prophet of Allah, tell your wives, if you choose this life and all its, I guess it's a beautification and adornment, then you can basically choose then, I will give you the mut'a. I will give you the mut'a, meaning I will give you the maintenance, and I will basically let you in a beautiful way just depart this marriage. And certainly that was the Prophet ﷺ basically ordered to tell them that. Therefore, we could say that even the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, if they were to choose to basically depart the marriage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was mentioning it right there, that they would have the right for that maintenance. And certainly just mentioning this piece of it, and of course, according to what Umar Sulaiman al-Ashqar was saying, he was basically saying that this would be her right if there was no intimacy. Of course, this would be right there. We would basically talk about every single divorcee if there was no intimacy, and if basically no mahar was mentioned, then of course you would have half the mahar. And also, look at this one. And this would be basically half of that mut'a as well. So does she get half the mut'a? No. She's not getting half the maintenance. But this would be basically the responsibility to get the maintenance. And even though we waived off the half of the mahar, but we replaced it with maintenance. So they considered that, well, this is half that mut'a, meaning we waived half the mahar, but we gave her full in maintenance. Okay, so let's continue right there. And basically, and they said that in Surah Al-Ahzab, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, إذا نكحتم المؤمنات ثم طلقتموهن من قبل أن تمسوهن فما لكم عليهن من عدة تعتدونها فمتعوهن وسرحوهن سراحا جميلا. So this is basically ordering, or you who believe, if you are married to the believing women, then you divorce them before you are intimate with them, then you don't have a idda, a waiting period that they have to be doing, and there, but you would have a responsibility to give them, here's the word, فَمَتِّعُوهُنْ. Then what you have to do is give them that maintenance. And وَسَرِّحُوهُنَّ صَرَاحًا جَمِيلًا. And then if you want to divorce them, well, divorce them in a good way. In other words, don't make her life miserable. Just make it simple, make it easy, and just let go. let her move on with her life, and you move on with your life as well. So therefore, al-mut'a that is mentioned in this ayah is basically a lot more comprehensive and therefore inclusive, to meaning more than just the women that had a marriage contract and were intimate. And therefore, this is basically right there to tell us that this is inclusive to what was even in Surah Al-Baqarah. And when it said لا جناح عليكم إذا طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة ومتعوهن على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره. Same thing. There's no sin upon you if you divorce women and in situations where you were not intimate with them or you did not assign a particular mahr, then what you need to give them is that maintenance. And it would be, if you are well maintained, well, give them basically equivalent to your well maintenance. Okay. And if the person was basically poorly maintained, in other words, low income, well, in that situation, you would basically do what you're capable of affording. And this would be a responsibility upon basically every Muslim and not just a muhsin. Okay. And of course, you're looking at these differences of opinions. Just wanted to note that one. And certainly, how much should he give in maintenance? Well, this would be dependent upon the person, looking at the situation, whether they are poor, they are rich, and certainly that's why it basically explained it. And على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره. And who's basically the one to determine, like, who would assign? Of course, he's going to, if we're depending on him, then he is going to probably lie about his income and say that's all I can afford. And probably, the same way that they're probably lying about income. And if we were to ask perhaps maybe for a bank statement, he probably has other cash that was not put in the bank, and then lie about the true amount of income or the true amount of savings that he has, and then just to basically lower the amount of money that he is basically asked to give. So in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember, he's the one that's telling you that you would have to give maintenance based on your income, based on your savings, and you're not going to cheat about it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows whether you had cheated or not. And just remember that one, and of course, depending on the people, depending on, the different circumstances, basically in different countries and so forth. Now, the question is, of course, well, how much of that mut'a is the lowest? Okay, that's the question. So al-mut'a, are we talking about a dir'a? What is a dir'a? Dir'a doesn't mean a shield. No, a dir'a is basically kind of like a abaya and a khimar, a hijab, and malhafa. Malhafa is basically something that they used to wear. I saw that in Qatar. They would basically sew the top layer over all the abaya and stuff. And that's basically, of course, during their time, this is what they would give. Ibn Qudama increased, and he basically said, well, the highest that he could give is basically a person like a maid. And the least is the amount of what would be enough of clothing to cover for her salah. Now, remember, I mean, during our times, no one would actually say, well, you know what, I'm going to give you salah clothes, which would be what? You know, depending on the country you're in, let's say in Malaysia, you can get a really good fabric. Okay, and it can be 150 ringgit. Okay, so we're looking at almost I don't know, almost $30, $40. Seriously, that's going to be the maintenance? Absolutely not. Okay. Now, during our times, that's definitely not going to be acceptable during our times. And that's why he said this was something that was the culture during their times, and therefore it wouldn't be what would be considered during our times. Remember, لا ينكر تغير الأحكام بتغير الأزمان. There's no doubt There's no objection that the rulings may change and are subject to change basically due to the change of culture, due to the change of environment, due to the change of city, due to the change of circumstances. And therefore, we cannot basically ask for something that was considered as a good maintenance, perhaps during their time. A prayer clothes and probably a subha and a prayer mat. That's not going to be the mut'a right there. Okay. Let's see. المذهب الحنفي, they basically had another condition. They said it should not exceed the limit of, remember, we're speaking about the woman that had a marriage contract, was not intimate, and a divorce happened. So we definitely waived, if there was a khalwa especially, we've waived half the mahar, but we're going to give her the maintenance. Okay, we're going to give her that maintenance. So if we're going to give her that maintenance, it should not be exceeding the amount of half the mahar that was waived. Remember, we waived half the mahar, so that maintenance should not exceed the amount of mahar that was waived, which is half. Okay, so let me give you an example. So let's say the mahar was, I don't know, let's give an even number, $6,000. Let's just, pretend. And then they got a divorce, okay, and no intimacy happened. So we waived half of it. So now it's $3,000. Okay, now we need to pay her mut'a. We may need to give her that maintenance to cover everything. Okay, well, this amount of maintenance cannot exceed the $3,000 that was waived. Okay, it cannot exceed the $3,000 that was waived. So just keeping that one in mind. Okay, let's see. What is their evidence? They said, well, he said, well, if we waived already half the mahar, then it would make no sense to basically multiply it from a different end. We waived half the mahar anyways, because we recognized that it wouldn't be fair to ask him to pay for a full amount of mahar when no intimacy happened. It makes no sense for us to somehow, multiply it on another end. So that was their logic behind it. Okay, any questions in regards to that one before we move on to the other subtopic? Okay, let's move on then. Right now we're going to talk about what if both the husband and the wife, they basically disputed the mahar. So she says it was $3,000 and he says no, it was actually $2,000. And it can happen that, especially, if you don't actually have that recorded on paper, that they can have this dispute. And perhaps maybe the witnesses don't even remember. So what happens then? Okay, so if the both basically had a dispute on the amount of mahar and what really had happened, the one says a number and the other one basically negates and says the objection, that wasn't actually the number. She's lying about it. So in that situation, if they basically had differences or a dispute on the amount that was basically assigned, in other words, was it 2,000, was it 3,000? And if there was a bayina, what is al-bayina? If there's an evidence, then we're going to use that evidence to basically rule based on that. Let's say we've got two witnesses that said actually it was 3,000. That's it. We're going to use that evidence. Okay. But let's just assume that he said, no, it wasn't 3,000. It was 2,000. And we'll say, do you have any evidence to support your claim? Well, I just remember that it was 2,000 because I refused. But she brought witnesses that said it was 3,000. And plus on the document, it says 3,000 and you signed to it. Therefore, your objection, sorry, is sustained. It's going to be basically objected. It's going to be rejected on the spot because we've got the evidence. Now, remember one thing. In case of dispute, let's just say he says, I'm willing to make an oath upon the Quran. Let's say he says, I'm willing to make an oath upon the Quran. No, we're not going to take that because al-bayyinatu ala al-mudda'i wal-yaminu ala man ankar. You need the bayyina, basically the evidence. And therefore, if you're going to just make that yameen right there, well, we're going to use that evidence as our keynote. Now, what oath you want to make right now, as long as I have that evidence, that's all I'm going to be depending on. Okay, let's see. What if there was no evidence? So she basically said, I've got my evidence. And of course, it turned out that her evidence right there, the witnesses, they both died. Oh dear. And the document, basically the marriage contract, somehow something spilled on it. And, the ink was basically in that area that basically said the number. It's not even clear. And she went to that document to get a copy or a blueprint of that. But somehow that masjid had some trouble, and they basically probably forgot to put it in their system. So now we're stuck. What happens then? So if there's no evidence, then in that situation, she would just get the equivalent mahar. Equivalent to what? Equivalent to the average of the mahar in her area or in her family. Okay. And that's basically exactly like a woman that didn't have a signed mahar. Sorry, you disputed that. You disputed and you said that there was a dispute, and we have him objecting to it. So in that situation, the best way to solve all of this is to give you the equivalent mahar. And that's basically the madhab Hanafi. And you could see, I absolutely love, I love all the madhab, but in madhab al-Hanafi, in circumstances of dispute, I don't think anybody basically had done their what is the word that I could use, but their way of research and their way of solving the dispute. Okay, but of course, but in madhab al-Hanafi, they said, but still, we still need both of the spouses basically to make an oath, and make an oath that they basically, she would say 3,000, and we would say, okay, I want you to make that oath. And he would, or at least that it wasn't assigned, or whether it was assigned, etc. They would both have to make an oath. But let's say she said, wallahi, it was 3,000. And put her hand on the Quran, even though it's a bid'ah, but put her hand on the Quran. And she basically said, wallahi, it's $3,000 that I was given as a mahar. And he said, wallahi, it's 2,000. Well, both are making an oath right there. Who am I going to believe? So in that situation, the qadi will say, you know what, I'm not going to reject either of you's oath because you're both making the same oath. And I'm not going to say, oh yeah, well, a man's oath is worth double the oath. No, we're not going to do that. So we're just going to, in this situation, solve the matter. And we'll just say, we'll give you the equivalent mahar, the standard mahar within your society. Okay, now here's one thing. But the madhab Hanafi, they said, well, on a condition that this equivalent mahar would not exceed the claim that the woman had made. So let's say the equivalent mahar was $5,000 and she was claiming $3,000. So then therefore, we're not going to use mahar al-mithal, which basically is exceeding the number that she claimed, but we're going to go up to the number that she had claimed if basically that was her claim, and lower, and we're going to basically not give her mahar al-mithal in if it is higher than her claim. Okay. Now here's one thing. Just keep that one in mind. What if it was the opposite? What if she was saying 2,000 and the husband was saying 3,000? Oh, what happens then? What should we do? Should we basically say, okay, well, since you are saying that it was a higher number, we're going to base it on the higher number. We're going to say, okay, you're saying 3,000 and she's saying 2,000. Yeah. Okay, all right. We're going to use your number then. Okay, we're going to use your number since she's asking for less. So we're just going to use your number, mister. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. And of course, of course, you might claim a certain number, and in that situation, like they would make this oath just to see if any of them would basically decide to be committed and basically have the integrity. But sometimes it's not necessarily a lack of integrity. Sometimes it can be a confusion. Sometimes it can happen that we may misunderstand something, especially during times when a person is, I guess, too excited or too angry. It can happen that our memory is not remembering each and every single thing. Okay. And of course, if let's say the man was basically giving a smaller number, uh, and we're looking at mahr al-mithal right there, looking at mahr al-mithal, the equivalent mahr. All right. So are we going to basically use that? So let's just assume mahr al-mithal was 5,000, just like we said. Okay. And the husband basically said that the mahr was let's say 6,000. Let's just assume the husband said the mahr was 6,000 and the equivalent mahr, the standard equivalent mahr, was 5,000. What are we going to do? We're going to use the number that the man had said. So if the equivalent mahr was less than the number that the husband is giving, we're going to take the higher number. And we're going to use the husband's number. If he's giving us a bigger number, we're going to use that. What are we doing? We're basically ruling in her favor. That's what we're trying to do. We're ruling in her favor. Okay. I know, in the end, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ said, كسرها طلاقها. I want you to keep that one in mind. Women, when they get divorced, I know some women want to celebrate, yay, I'm done with all of this, and think that they want to celebrate that she's done with this marriage, that she probably was not too excited about, etc. But regardless, divorce is kasr, is breaking the woman. Divorce is not easy. A woman, and this is all women, by the way, and I hope men are hearing this. When a woman gets married, she does not just get married unless she really wants to be committed to this marriage, regardless who she was, unless she really wanted to be committed, unless she really trusted you, unless she really loved you, unless she had really seen you as a man. That was the only thing that she was really hoping for. I know that perhaps maybe her attitude did not help the situation. Perhaps, I mean, it can happen. Maybe her attitude, her behavior, whatever, it can happen. But I will guarantee you that every single woman puts in an amount of effort that she wants this marriage to work out. Maybe it wasn't enough effort. Maybe it wasn't enough effort. But regardless of who she is, just the whole idea of a divorce, it is not easy for a woman to just leave a marriage that she had invested in and just walk away like that. Because deep on the inside, she's going to feel broken. She's going to feel like she had failed something. She's going to feel ruptured. That's basically what kasruha talaqha means. Ruptured. It's not easy at all to feel ruptured, to feel torn, to feel like something just broke you and shattered you into pieces. Is not easy whatsoever. So certainly, all this maintenance does not necessarily compensate for all the different psychological harm or probably, the trauma that she went through. You might say, well, I didn't cause a trauma. You may not have wanted to cause a trauma. At the end, she is living the trauma. She is living a trauma. She needs a time of therapy. That's why Islam had actually made the time of iddah. It's a time of therapy. Islam is letting you know that every single woman, once she is divorced, كسرها طلاقها, she is broken, she is shattered, she is living a trauma. When you say broken, you say shattered, you say torn. In modern terminology, they'll use trauma. She is living a trauma. Whether you meant to hurt her or whether you didn't mean to hurt her, whether it was her fault, whether it's not her fault, it is a trauma that Islam considers she needs some time to heal from it. Let's not use this dichotomy and start thinking, oh, you're just supporting women. You're just trying to be a feminist. No, that's nothing to do with feminism. It has nothing to do with feminism. This has nothing to do with misogyny, feminism, none of that. This has something to do with Islam's diagnose. With Islam's diagnose for a female psychology, regardless of whose fault it is. Islam is giving you a diagnosis for a female psychology and letting you know that that second, that marriage results in a resolution, results in an ending, whether she was asking for it or whether you were asking for it, at the end of the day, it is something that will shatter, that will bring a trauma, that she needs time to heal, etc. This is not saying that, let's not use this dichotomy. I'm not calling you in any shape or form, because it depends on the circumstance. It depends on the situation. It could be her fault. I'm not basically, saying who's the victim here. I'm letting us know that a woman's psychology views divorce as a trauma, and it is something that basically creates a scar deep within. Okay, regardless, this is not to call the man, the perpetrator or any of that. This is just to lay out, regardless of whose fault it is, lay out a certain psychology that Islam acknowledges that women go through. And this is extremely important to keep in mind. Okay, now let's see right there. And in Hanbali madhab, they basically, hold on, I think I left off right here. If the husband and wife, basically they dispute the amount of mahar, so one says 1,000, the other says 2,000, then of course the madhab Hanafi and Muhammad actually means Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, who's actually the key figure, perhaps along with Abu Yusuf, Yaqub ibn Ibrahim, as the student of Abu Hanifa. And then they said, well, if they dispute, automatically, we're just going to go for the equivalent mahar. They said automatically. And that's basically also the Shafi'i as well. They just said, if they both make an oath, we're just going to just automatically just go for mahr al-mithal and end the dispute without even going into, do you have evidence? Do you have this and all of that? Let's just go and say, you've got mahr al-mithal and end the dispute right there. But of course, they all agreed that if there's evidence, we would have to basically base it on the evidence. Okay, the Hanbali, on the other hand, they basically said, well, if there's one of them that basically claimed that it was the mahr al-mithal, meaning the equivalent mahr, and if the husband basically that it is mahr al-mithal or even more, then we're going to be basing it on what he's saying. He's saying that's more than mahr al-mithal, so the man either used the amount of mahr al-mithal, basically the equivalent mahar, or he's giving us a higher number, we're going to take his higher number. But if the wife basically said a mahr al-mithal, or she had given a smaller number, then you know what, we're just going to go for what you had said. You said that it was mahr al-mithal, or it's a smaller number than what was claimed from the husband. We're just going to take your words for it. We're just going to go take it there. Okay, now just to, of course, to mention right there, we're just going to be also using the oath as a supporting evidence. But the wife or the husband, if somebody is making an oath, they do have the right to basically object to the integrity of either of the two and basically bring witnesses that this person's integrity and therefore their oath is not accepted and for these reasons. So that's basically the end of this one. Let's go for the other topic, the subtopic, al-hiba. And what is al-hiba anyways? Al-hiba is basically when one of the relatives from the wife's side basically says, you know what, I also get kind of like a commission or, get a gift as well for this marriage. So wait a minute. So let's say the wali, give an example. Let's say the wali, he basically asked for the mahar of, let's say, $6,000. Okay. And along with the $6,000 that you're going to be paying, $2,000 are going to go for me, not of the six, but no, $6,000 as in mahar, and $2,000 are a gift for me as her father. Okay. Is this permissible or not? Well, why are you asking for $2,000? Well, I was the one that was raising her. I deserve a gift for doing all of this, at least $2,000. Is this permissible or not? Well, this is a dispute between scholars, by the way. The Shafi'i madhab, they basically had considered that this is making mahar basically become a place of dispute and a place of problem, basically. And therefore, she would have the right for the equivalent mahar. Whether this hiba / this gift that was, or this commission, whether it was for the father or whether it was for someone else. In other words, for the Shafi'i, they said, you know what, if somebody's doing that, then we've got a problem right there because this is supposed to be mahar. But if this mahar right now has more than one owner, this isn't making sense. So therefore, he regarded that this mahar becomes canceled out. We can't have more than one owner for something that is basically to be assigned for her. That was the Shafi'i argument. All right. And there were some Shafi'i scholars that actually considered that is permissible for the father to get this commission, gift, whatever, but not other relatives. Not other relatives would have that right. And that's also something that the Hanbalis had said. Let's say Ibn Qudama, who is also a Hanbali, in his Mughni, I'm assuming that, yeah, right there. So he basically, he actually said it in where? In al-Muqni'. Okay. In tazawwajaha, let's say he got married to her, that there would be $1,000, let's say, dollars for her and $1,000 for her father, said it would be permissible according to Ibn Qudama right there. And basically all of that basically becomes her mahar. But then if he divorced her before even any intimacy and after they had basically received all of that, then what she would give back, رجع عليها ب1000, he would be, or what he would give her basically is that 1,000. Okay. And the father, ولم يكن على الأب شيء مما أخذ. Okay. So therefore the father is not responsible. So in other words, the father wouldn't give it to her. And now, in other words, this was basically treated as a gift to the father, and he doesn't have to return it. So according to Ibn Qudama, the father doesn't even have to return this if there was a resolution. Okay, let's see. This was the opinion for Ishaq, Masruq, and the evidence that they used was this. Let's look at this evidence. In the story of Prophet Shu'aib, was it Prophet Shu'aib or just a Rajul Salih? It was Prophet Musa alayhi salam. It wasn't necessarily Prophet Shu'aib. Not all scholars said it was Prophet Shu'aib, but okay, we're just going to leave it at that. Okay, so he said, I want you to marry one of my daughters. on a condition that you would work for me for 8 consecutive years. What does he do? That is Prophet Musa alayhi salam. What does he do? Well, he basically works as a shepherd in service, basically going for the father. Wait a minute. So what is the girl getting out of all of this? He's basically working for the father, not working for the girl. Where's the girl's mahar in all of this? Where's the mahar for her? And that's the evidence that they said. Well, they said, well, right there, the service was basically on his sheep. And therefore, they said, well, this was a condition that he would be in service to him. And if he was in service to him, not the girl, then they said, this is our evidence that, sure, we can give certain amount of, whether it's service working for the father, or whether it's a gift that the father would say, I also want a gift. This is how much you have to pay me. Can the father actually say that? So that's their evidence. Their evidence was right there. And of course, certainly the other scholars will dispute that that's not, remember the part about Shari'atu man qablana, the Sharia of the past prophets. Is it our legislation as well? Can we use that and plagiarize it, or can we not? Remember, that's a dispute between the scholars of usul, let alone the scholars of fiqh. Let's see the other evidence. أنت ومالك لأبيك. You and your wealth belong to your father. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, إن أولادكم من كسبكم فكلوا من أموالهم. Your children's wealth is from your basically income, so take from their money as well. So what does that mean? If my son is working, I'm going to be taking his money? Not necessarily, only if I needed to. And this is extremely important. Only if I needed to, but not necessarily if my son is working, that I'm going to demand that he would pay me every single month this amount of money. If I had my own income, and this income is basically maintaining me, I don't have the right to say, hey, you still have to give me money. And I know in certain cultures that the son is expected to send money to their parents regardless, thinking that you just have to send money, that's it. But that's actually not necessarily true. It is only true if they need that money. And one thing I would like to tell the mothers, especially the mothers, many times I would say mothers, they would get money, let's say, get money from their sons. And even though, let's say, perhaps maybe she has money, and certainly for an older woman, she may not need the same amount of maintenance as probably as her son and the growing family. The maintenance that is needed is completely different. They need school, they need probably different goods for their school, different goods for maintaining the children, etc. For an older woman, even the amount of food is not going to be the same. The most thing that we'll probably be needing money for is really healthcare and probably certain maintenance to help us, or to help that older woman basically move around in the house, maybe a rail, maybe, these type of seats that basically are capable of going up the stairs. These are the only things, but, just a couple things that need maintenance, or perhaps even money to get a maid or some PCA or something like that. But that's basically it. And certainly sometimes it can be more than an average person. But at the end of the day, it's very important to remind the many mother-in-laws, I'll say mother-in-laws right there, many times, or mothers, they think that, yeah, my daughter-in-law should not be the one that should have this money, and therefore she'll basically abuse and feel that she wants to drain her son from the money that he has, because she feels that her daughter-in-law doesn't deserve that. That's absolutely not acceptable. That is dhulm. That's oppression, wallahi. Do not drain your son, and let your son live happy with his wife and with his kids. But to feel that you want to drain because you're not comfortable, or your daughter-in-law gave you a bad look the other day, or she probably was not living up to your expectations of what hygiene and what good looking and what good cooking looks like, just give them their space. If he's comfortable, that's all that matters. If your son is comfortable with her, that's all that matters. It's not about you feeling comfortable with her. It's about your son being comfortable with her. It's all that matters. They're comfortable with each other. By all means, let them figure it out themselves. Okay. Imam Ibn Rushd right there. Let me just talk about Ibn Rushd for a bit. Ibn Rushd, they basically were three generations, okay? But Ibn Rushd had one very important book. It's called Bidayat al-Mujtahid. And he basically said for Imam Malik, he basically had said that if the condition was to say that this was for his daughter, then, or وإن كان بعده فهو له. Okay, لأن في اشتراطه عند العقد تهمة النقصان. Okay, so basically right there, if there's a dispute, and he basically made it a condition that, this mahar would be for his daughter, but later on, he basically wanted to deduct something for himself, that would not basically be permissible, because the mahar is for the girl and not for the father. So he cannot deduct from her mahar something on his own. But if he wanted to condition on the man to give him a separate gift, then that would not be part of the mahar, according to Malikis. Okay. But if he said, I want a separate amount for myself, that's on a side of the mahar, then he would give him something on, if he was interested, okay, on a side, basically to give the father, and that would not be included in the value of mahar. Okay, we'll stop right here, because I would move forward, but I could see everybody is probably, I don't know, the numbers are going down, and I could see people are like, you know what, let us absorb all of this. So I'll stop right here, and inshallah tomorrow, let's see, what else do we have? We got just a
Friday.
Yeah, so tomorrow is Friday.
Same time.
Oh no, well, your Friday, my Saturday.
Your Saturday.
Yeah. So right there, let's see what we're going to talk about. Increasing the mahar and claiming as the mahar to be a certain number. And let's see, what else? Now, this one is fun to talk about. How much of an income is he supposed to be paying her? And what does that even include? And what if she was working? Does she have to pay anything? Stay tuned
Don't think.
for more on this topic
I have
tomorrow.
question.
Go ahead, dear.
Yeah, honey. When you said that لأن كسرها طلاقها, it's very يعني very very يعني touch the heart and make someone يعني like barely to cry. But can we say that the wisdom from al-idda or al-mahr, it's to cool her heart and her feeling
No
from that
question.
trauma?
Absolutely.
Can I
Absolutely.
can I continue it, please?
Yep, yep, yep.
To heal her from this trauma and to wake up of this idda. It's enough time for months and 10 days to think about the new life, how she can start it and invest the mahar, use it for the new life, and think well about if she will get married again or not. So it's like enough time to heal her heart and heal her feeling, right? It's not only for mut'a.
I agree with you, but for women, money is not everything. Women don't look at money as everything. Women see the psychological aspects, the feeling valued or feeling that you are of no value. Because usually, and what women, it's part of our own instinct. that we feel of value when men affirm that. That's basically a woman's psychology. She's always waiting for a man to affirm it. That's why you see all these women out there, they're dressing up, and even though it's probably hard to walk in those heels, and probably hard to put on all this makeup, because it's basically closing your pores and making it basically, even hotter than it already is, and probably dressing up in certain clothes that are not really the most comfortable, all of that. But what she's really trying to gain is social acceptance. And the social acceptance that she's mainly trying to gain is a man's social acceptance. So that moment when this man, even though she probably disputed with him, is telling her that you are not wanted, I don't have any interest in you, that is, for a woman, that's shattering her confidence. That's shattering her her psychology, because she gets that affirmation, she gets that comfort, she gets that dopamine by seeing somebody affirm that she is desired, that she is wanted, that she is loved, that she's important, all of that. So the second when he says, you know what, I'm not interested in you, I'm basically, that's it. You are the last thing I want to see on this face of the earth.
Okay, I'm with you with this point, but I'm talking about the wisdom of the iddah. It's long time for her to think well and to heal from the first trauma with the husband. Second, mahr, it's not only for the psychological things or something for feeling. What about her if she want to start her life without any income? This is the only income source she can start her life, and
I
to
don't
find a
really
work,
know,
to find a place to live.
agree with you, but I don't know if even that amount of maintenance you're barely covering to live, let alone to invest. Like
And
how
start.
this is to help me. This is to help me what? Pay these bills, to help me, pay the gas, etc. I won't even have time. Two, the amount of money is barely covering my expenses, let alone for me to use that money to start a business, or to start perhaps maybe some kind of an investment. It's not easy at all.
I know,
That's
yeah.
why she needs her family to support her on this.
If she has
It's so
not,
easy. It's so easy for a lot of people. I see this all the time. I see this all the time. Women come to me and they're divorced, and, they're, regardless of whether it's her fault or not her fault. I know many times, we could say in theory, maybe you should have done this, maybe you should have done that. But you have to know that there are these situations that, no matter what you invest in them, it is easy in giving theory, but it's so hard in living the circumstance. SubhanAllah,
what you gonna
it's
do?
exactly. That's why, I
She will
would
be
tell
homeless.
the family, I would really reach out to the family and say, please, it's not time right now to say, this is what you could have done better. This is what you did wrong. It's your fault on this. That's the last thing she wants to hear. Try to redirect her vision. Try to redirect her vision to see herself that, Alhamdulillah, maybe it's for the khair. I want you to be strong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will compensate you. Allahumma khlifni fi musibati wa ajirni khayran minha. Ya Allah, give me a better compensation. This is not the time to somehow scold her and make her feel worse than what she is already feeling. That's what I want to say. When
Yeah,
a woman is going through this, please don't use that as the time to somehow discipline. It's over. It is over. All I need you to do right now is validate her pain. Right now, just validate her pain. She's in pain. She's in grief. She's sad. She's broken. Just validate it. That's all I want from you.
Right.
When you validate her pains,
Mm.
that doesn't mean you're approving what she might have done wrong. You're just validating her pains to help her heal. That's all I want from you.
Okay, okay,
Help her heal at that moment. That's it.
okay.
It's not time for disciplining her.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not talking about the other side or her family-in-law or her ex-husband what's doing. I'm talking about the wisdom of al-idda and al-mahr in Islam. That's it. That this amount, this time Islam gave her, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her, is to heal her feeling, to cool her feeling, plus to think about the next day, tomorrow, what she gonna do after she finish Iddah. You see, she has to start a new life. I believe that because no husbands, even she is a widow, she is divorced, the boss. But about the mahar, he agreed to give her mahar. But we said what the beautiful in Islam that this mahar is good for a lady or a wife that she has no family, like here in America. She has no
Right.
family here, and she got what she want from the mahar, and she can't to prove it that I have enough money to rent a apartment at least. Otherwise, because she
Right.
has
What
no
I
income.
would, right. I absolutely agree with you. I usually tell these women, I don't want you to always look back. Islam doesn't want you to always look back what happened and always think of the trauma. Islam wants you to think of hope.
Yeah,
Islam wants you to look past the past and
right.
look to the future and
Yeah,
look that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically promised you inna ma'al usri yusra.
yeah,
That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told you.
right,
Inna
right.
ma'al usri yusra. Don't let that shatter you. We know that it's painful, but I don't want you to focus on the pain. I want you to focus on what can I do to heal? What can I do to start a new start? What can I do? And remember, divorce does not define you.
Yeah, yeah.
Many women, they define themselves based on their social status. I'm a divorcee. That doesn't define you.
No,
Just keep
no,
that
no.
one in mind.
I'm not
Many
talking.
women,
Maybe the language not tell you what I want to say.
no, I
يعني
understand what you're saying. You're
يعني
basically
I'm not
saying, hey,
talking about
is
the
that
feeling, not to talk about anything, but about الجمال الإسلام بالعدة والمهر. That's it.
I
إنه
agree
المهر
with you,
يعني يعطيها الفرصة إنه تبلش حياة جديدة. خلص ما تنظر لورا.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with you that, she could utilize basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given her in terms of nafaqa or in terms of mahr, utilize that to basically grow and start a new life rather than just see it as a moment of grief. That's what you're trying to say. I agree with you. I
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you.
This is the
But I'm
fair in
actually
Islam.
talking, yeah, I'm actually, I guess, in addition to what you're saying, in addition to what you're saying, I'm trying to speak to the women that are going through this, and I'm basically saying, ladies, and also to their families, please, right now, all I want you to do is validate their feelings and try to help them, one, utilize what they have, and two, not define themselves based on this social status. I know in certain cultures, they will define women based on that she's a divorcee. In certain cultures, that's like swearing at somebody. That's like swearing at somebody in certain cultures, and it becomes another, I guess, another word of saying unwanted. In certain cultures, the word divorcee is another way of saying that she was rejected, that she was used, she was rejected, she was not of anybody's interest, and that she is a failure. That's how many will define the word divorced, that she failed, she was not successful enough, she was trialed, and was a failure did not prove that she is of value. I do not want you to define divorce that way.
It's only in the
Divorce, absolutely. It's not to be defined that way.
it's only in the Arab society, isn't it? And in
No, it's not
Muslim,
actually. You'll be surprised.
even America.
Pakistanis is even worse. Sorry, Pakistani culture in
I know
treating divorced women is way worse.
Muslim,
I
Muslim. I
thought the
mean,
Arabic culture, I
yeah,
thought the Arabic culture was really bad at this,
yeah.
but it turns out that, sorry, Pakistani culture in dealing with divorced women
Mm.
is way harsher.
We can say
This is
woman,
not to say, what was that?
Muslim woman, but not American woman. See, because we don't
Well, no,
understand
no,
Islam well.
I'm talking about certain cultures,
Mm,
certain cultures, and in maybe perhaps, in different cultures, especially
mm,
um, that I did matchmaking. I'll tell you in certain cultures, Afghani culture, Pakistani culture,
mm.
certain cultures, Uzbek, they would see a divorced woman like she is basically, that's it, she's used and thrown.
Why it's not in American the same? In America, we feel her that she is very happy if she divorced and she divorced him.
No, I don't
Not feel this
necessarily think
down,
that
same
in the
the
American
woman.
culture.
Not feel this
Uh,
down or break
I,
heart.
no, even a Western woman, every single woman is going to feel ruptured after a divorce, unless he was such a pain, unless he was such an abusive person that it's like, finally, I'm done with this problem. But even if she were to feel that way, there is also that emptiness to feel. Even if he was an abusive person, she probably was the one to ask for the divorce, and probably, in certain cultures, they would actually celebrate for a divorce, like in Mauritania.
Mm?
Mauritania, they would celebrate a divorce. You wonder, like, what, wait a minute. Yeah, and they would consider that her value goes up in a divorce. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I don't know how, but yeah. I don't know how, but yeah, in Mauritania, the situation is different. You would think of Mauritania being very primitive, but guess we gotta see how in certain cultures, they would celebrate a divorce. I think in Libya, in certain parts of Libya as well. So, I don't know how these women tend to actually make a party for getting a divorce. It's like, I'm done. Okay.
Prove how much she suffered means.
I have no idea. But, maybe tell me in your culture in the comments, or probably the comments on YouTube, or probably in the chat, tell me your culture and how do women heal, or how do women feel, or how are divorced women treated?
Mhm.
And what therapy do they use to help them move on? And yes, it's quite interesting to see, like, different cultures and how they relate to it, and different women and how they relate to it.
Mm.
It's quite interesting. Quite interesting.